I didn't expect an audience. I thought people would be looking at paintings while I'd be just over here drawing, which eventually, please get up, casual. I was a high school teacher for 20 years, so I'm used to not paying that much attention. Are you a teacher? Are you? Yeah. So I don't know. I was just going to play around with my pastels. Most of you are pastelists. You're just new at it, right?
Very good.
Yeah, good.
And I don't do any.
You don't do it. Can you see it? Can you?
No, but I'll get it going.
You can mark it. Yeah.
Okay. Or we could move it there.
So I'm a teacher, so I'm going to be casual. My background here. I have some cards up here if you want.
I think they bring you more chairs too.
Okay.
The QR code takes you to my website. I did that myself. I was so proud of it. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree and a number of master courses because I was going to get my master's. But the year I was taking my courses, that summer I had a choice of either having an immersion course in Maine or going abroad and traveling through Europe. I chose Europe. So I've been teaching since the late 80s. It was something I could do when my kids were small. And my husband would get home and I'd go teach adult ed, and then I taught other things, and eventually ended up teaching high school, and I taught art as well as foreign languages. And I love art and all different varieties. I started as an oil painter. I started as a sculptor, actually. But in the state of Maine, I thought, how can you make any sort of living on three-dimensional art, no less two-dimensional art? So I went into painting, mostly oil, some watercolor. Pastel was a sketch medium for me back then. Doing really well in oil until my husband would get headaches from it, so I had to stop oils. Went into watercolor, which my mother did, so she was a watercolorist full-time. And it was nice because when the kids are little, watercolors you can paint really quickly and put them away, but then the cat would walk across if you didn't cover them, and you get paw prints everywhere. And I started getting deeper into pastels at that point because you could pick it up and put it down without worrying about cleaning your brushes, doing all this other mess. But it wasn't until 2017 when a friend of mine, who is not in this room right now, she's in the other room, hooked me into the Pastel Society. And that was Lee Makos. She said, "You gotta come, we have these great groups." So I came and got hooked because the group was so supportive and so wonderful. That's how I got really going. Got to know a lot of these wonderful people in here right now. So yeah, that's enough. That's background. So lately I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina for 5 years. I've been teaching down there. I've taught at the museum, a number of online courses. When COVID hit, what do? I'd always wanted to make YouTube videos, so I started doing that. My first ones are still up, but the audio wasn't, I didn't have a microphone on, so as I was turning around, it would fade away, and got better at that. Started teaching online, and that's my background. My name is Terrilynn Dubreuil. For those that don't know, sorry, should have started with that. I don't know. I'm a little nervous right now because I wasn't expecting a sitting audience. Any questions before I get moving on? No? Sketchbooking, to me, is very, very important. I have a number of sketchbooks. I take them with me almost everywhere. This is for those artists. This is Strathmore. It's a multimedia textbook, sketchbook. It has thicker paper. It's not quite 300 watercolor paper, but it's maybe 250. I like it. I love working in charcoal and vine charcoal or willow charcoal, but it smudges in your book. I have one here. This is graphite. I saw some haze on a window, and the haze looked like a face to me. So I drew that really quickly, but if you see, it smudges. Even graphite smudges. So I, over a number of years, have found these tools, and I can pass these around. I really like these. They work quickly, they're a pen, you can sketch in quickly, and then I take the water brush, and while the ink is still fairly fresh, I can wash it, and it creates almost like a watercolor, tonal value scale watercolor, which is great for reference. You can see sometimes these little rectangles. This is a nice way of kind of organizing my sketches. And what I do with that is I use something that I always have with me, which is my cell phone. In the back of my cell phone, it's a little case and has a credit card. So I just put the credit card down and I draw around the credit card, and I've got these nice little vertical and horizontal rectangles to play with. I use my sketchbooks a lot for reference. Instead of, sometimes I would plan a painting with the color and the tone and the feeling, and sometimes I go intuitively. I like sketches because this way I have the image there, but then I can invent the color that I want. I can invent the color scheme and play around with that. I also make notes when I'm on location as I'm sketching. It's kind of like a little journal for me, but these notes also help bring me back to that time and place. Why did I initially choose this and paint it, or draw it even? What was it that attracted me to that particular subject at that time? And I'll tell what type of day it is, you know, maybe it's a hazy day. Like today was great. Did you notice the haze today? It's driving and that blue-purple haze first thing in the morning, so your aerial perspective of distance sets way, way, way back. That was exciting. So I'll make little notes like that. Maybe it's a bright sunny day, maybe it's early morning, and that way it's just reading those little bit of notes help take me back to that moment that initially gave me the feeling, why am I going to draw 13 inches? Sometimes off to the side, I'll do little, look, this is not my credit card, this is my phone. It just kind of, it wraps it in. Yeah, Lee, I just, you know. And I just mentioned Lee, she was the one that really got me involved in this group, and I really am so appreciative of that. Yes. And she sold me my filing box, and she said, this is used and it's dirty, and I'm like, yes, thank you, because it's been so special to me. So that's kind of my sketchbook. And I'll pack you up. I've got class. Pass these around. What, should I go crisscross or all together? Crisscross. But I do like these pens. There's two. There's a 3 millimeter and there's an 8. So I have a thin one and a thick one, which I can easily do. And then that water brush, it's great. I have a small backpack that I take sketching if it's in the car, like if I'm hiking. So I always have something. Strathmore multimedia sketchbook. I took the cover off, and I put stickers on it. It makes it personal. I'm not sure what else to say. I'm just trying to think anything logically. Besides my sketches, which again I enjoy because I have a freedom to create, being more creative with that instead of looking at a photograph and being pulled into the image. Not so much tied into the image, but when we're looking at a photo, I find, especially for myself and many others, I think that we're tempted to almost copy it. And it's a good way to kind of somehow get away from that copying aspect. And by starting with your sketch, that's all you have. Often I'll have the sketch and I'll have a photo as well. So I'll start with a sketch, get going. If I need details, I will work with this. Our devices are wonderful. I mean, if you've been painting for decades, remember when you had to decide, like, oh, this painting needs something and I'm not sure what it needs, and we would take colored magazine pages and we'd rip them in little shapes and set them on and say, nope, that's not quite right, and move things like around like that. You remember, right? There are great programs today that do that, so I'll take a picture. Let me show you one here. I might. Where did it go? Sorry. So I'm working on this particular painting that is kind of from a photograph, but I've let it change somewhat. And it's a field on top of a hill, you know, with some trees nearby. The photo came, my granddaughter and I, when she was like 4 years old, were out in the field walking. And nowadays we have to check for ticks all the time. Remember as kids we used to go and lie in a field and we didn't worry about it. So I know I want to put a figure in here somewhere. How do we make those decisions sometimes? You know, so I could take the painting and take a little piece of black paper or something or stick it on. I've been using Procreate. If you know of that, you're familiar with that. It's a nice simple program. It's kind of like Photoshop. It's a lot simpler and more user-friendly. So by using Procreate, I can stick a little figure in and I can move it around in different spots and decide what would be the best placement of this figure. So that's a great way that we have these tools, and they have that for the phone as well. You guys are probably familiar. If I'm repeating stuff you already know, just move me on. I know Terry already knows all this.
No, I know.
All right, I need to get back to my... No, I can't find my albums. Favorites, there it is. Okay. I'm fascinated by texture and color and light. When I started out, primary colors were my strength. I was very bold with my colors. I found as I've been maturing, I'm working more into grays. And recently, because my mother just passed, I'm doing a lot of deeper grays, just very, very soft grays. But this is on a walk on the beach. I'll take photos. Are you like crazy photo takers like I am, like constantly? Because they're reference and you can use them. And I like this, it was backlit. The light was strong and soft and almost toneless. So I thought I'd play with that. And many of you have seen my favorite little tree, I'm sure. Here you go. My little stalwart tree. This is on Higgins Beach if you want to go visit it. I keep being tempted to give it a name, but I haven't yet. The reason I was like, oh, music. This tree to me tells a story. It has a history. It's not just a tree. I'm living down in North Carolina. The trees down there don't have to survive nor'easters and all these storms. And so they're very, usually straight trees, very nicely formed. This one's been through a lot. To me, it's like my life. You know, it's insides from time to time just get ripped out of you and are damaged and hurt. But we keep going on and we survive. And he keeps growing. And birds fly into this tree all the time. He's accepting, and it's just, I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of off on things. But there's so much to me with this little tree. And then there's a number of times, you can see there's a snow fence in front. And there's also one off to the beach side. So I've been starting to incorporate that. My painting in this show has the snow fence kind of in it. And why would I paint an image over and over and over? Monet did it, right? Because we learn through the familiarity of that image. Because we become so familiar with it, so comfortable with it, that we can switch it up and try different things. You know, if you're starting with something new that you haven't seen before, you're out plein air, you're discovering that and learning for the first time that particular image. But if you have an image that you've worked with over and over, you can experiment with it more and do a lot of different things. So that's why I like it. A lot of you watched Ben and like remember when we did, what did we do? Nugget nights last winter? So you've heard a lot of this, I apologize. Okay, somebody has to say something so I can take a drink of water.
I'm not a painter, so every single thing you say, I'm learning something.
Wonderful. There's a lot to painting, multiple layers. I do have treatment, my Patreon group, we've been going through the elements and principles of art, because some of them have an art background and some don't, and they just love creating. So you want to give them, that's what one of the things I do with the nuggets last winter.
You're going back.
Here, somebody came over and touched the paper.
We already did
Yeah,
that.
I know. Did you figure out this one?
Well, yeah, that's a UR.
This is UArt, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it? UArt is one of the go-to papers. It's a sandpaper for artists. This is what I worked on until 2017 when I joined PSA. That's the first time I knew anything about sanded paper. Before it was Canson Mi-10, which is this paper. So it hasn't been that long. I was like, sanded paper. This is awesome. So if you don't, I'm going to pass this around for those that haven't. And I worked on that with my two types of pastels, were New Pastel and Rembrandt. And for decades, that's all I had. Now we have so many different types of pastels. We have pan pastels, for those that don't know. It's the pastels, but it's in this little foundation kit. What do you want to call these? Like little pens. You can come up, you can see my pastels. I have a variety. We have some that are very, very soft, some are very hard. I save my dust. Normally in my studio, I make a little deep trowel to catch the dust as I'm working. That way I can save it, and I have little jars I put different families of colors in. And then you can reconstitute your pastels. And I also have purchased some pastel ground, which is just the pigment ground. Now most pastels they started coming from minerals. Remember back in the Lascaux caves, like the cave paintings, they used dust. And I started doing that. I started collecting silt and dust to make pastels. I'll show you here. They're kind of dirty, so you don't want to. This first one, this tan one, for those on the video, sorry. The first time I did it, all I had to grind up my pastel dust was the top of a jar. Now I use a mortar and pestle, and then I got a muller, which really makes it even more fine. If it is from a pre-made pastel, all you have to do is add a little water or alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, back into it to make a paste, and then shape it back into a pastel, so you're not wasting anything. And I'm a New Englander, don't like waste. This first one, the tan one, you can see I didn't grind it up very well, so there's little flecks in it. This is great for rocks, but if you're doing someone's face, you don't want to drag your pastel across and have a streak of some other color there. This tannish one, this is sand. So I just went to I think this is Claudette's Beach, for those that know Claudette. I think this is Popham Beach, and I made a pastel. To do that, I had to add a binder, which I use gum tragacanth. And that is a natural sap from a tree in the Mideast. It's very similar to gum arabic. You could also use that. You get it in a gel form, and it helps you form the pastel. And this is more the pigment that I purchased. And you can add it with some little grit if you want, or no grit, and make your own pastels. So you can see how this it wasn't ground up a night. And you can see the mica in this one too, because that's the sand one. And I've been talking to Mary Beth about doing a little workshop on, hey, let's bring in our dust and make more pastels.
Thank you. So that's sand? It must be very fun.
It's basically sand. I think I did mix it with a little brown pigment. No, it's a brown pigment, but titanium white, I think I used.
Does the sand make the color on it?
It's the color of what the sand is. So this is the beach. So I have these three are sand from different places. This one has a little more titanium white in it.
Really?
And when I was going out to IAPS, for those that know IAPS, did everyone? I was driving out, and as you're driving across Texas and Oklahoma, and you're just driving for hours, there's not much change out there, except the soil and the dirt changes very subtly as you're going along. So it's a little more green here, it's a little more rose-colored there. So I would stop beside the road, get myself some really fine sand, and then you can suspend it. There's a whole number of ways of putting it together. I do have a YouTube video on that, and I need to make a new one. But it's really, I enjoy it. It takes time, but it's enjoyable. And I have colors that I normally would not have. A lot of grays, things. So, this is my variety pastels, pen pastels. And I start usually with my drawing with the vine charcoal. Don't know why, it's just, everybody tries different things and different things work for different people. A lot of you know Lynn Celta. I know she starts with an acrylic, very thin acrylic underwash, just a very, very dark color to lay in her basic drawing. I like the vine charcoal. It blends nicely with the pastel, sits nicely on the paper. Again, here's the UART paper. There's a number of different papers you can get now. This nice dark is not UART dark. Did you figure that out?
I didn't touch it, I don't know what it is.
This is sandpaper.
Oh, I thought so.
This is wet dry sandpaper that I get on Amazon. You can buy it at the hardware store, but you get 3 sheets for like $10. On Amazon, you get 10 sheets for $10. So this is great for quick sketches and drawings without spending a lot of money. I also tend to like papers that I can reuse. If a painting doesn't come out well, I want one that can wash off and I can reuse it. There are some papers out there that you have to do it directly. You can't wash it off if it's done. Tara Will uses one that's beautiful, but you can't wash it. I'm just so kind of frugal. So,
Is that dark one a sandpaper?
it's just sand.
What is it?
It's a wet dry sandpaper.
That's what they, wet dry sandpaper?
If you want to know, just let me know.
So, Terrilynn,
Yes,
is the wet dry sandpaper darker than the UART dark?
It's about the same actually, and I've got this kind of down. I'm sorry, I handed that
Oh,
around.
it's okay.
But the tooth is just about the same. And I was finding that beginning pastel students, people who want to try it that have never tried it before, you start looking at your supplies and the money starts adding up very quickly. So talking with other teachers, international group of teachers that I'm in, and discussing what can we do to make it more attainable to new people without breaking the bank. And so I found this sandpaper, which I think works really nicely. It's probably not archival, but I don't think it's going to fall apart in 10 years either. I mean, it can handle water, so it's going to be pretty solid. And found a South Korean pastel that's called Mungyo pastel. And I did a quick light fastness test on it. And it's not bad. There was only a couple of the pigments that faded a little bit over, I think, a month or 2 that I did it. But new pastel, some of those fade over time too. So, but for beginners, taking this sandpaper and those Mungyo pastels, which you can get 64 half sticks for about $10. And it has almost the texture of a Terrilynn Dubreuil pastel. For those of you that know pastel. Great for your beginning students.
Do you use textured
Yes.
wet sandpaper on Amazon?
I get it on Amazon. Okay. There are different ones. This, I like the gray one. There's no tan. There is a purple one. And there's, I think, a rusty colored one. So, but I've been looking around.
With regular sandpaper that's not wet dry,
I have, yeah.
does it work already?
That works fine too. Yeah, for quick sketches, just regular sandpaper works fine. I just thought this might be a little more strong because it is wet dry.
Yeah.
And it's a finer grit. So the grits are not exactly the same. I think this grit is like an 800 or 1,000 grit, and this is probably 500. You are. So they're not exactly the same scale in the grit.
At Haystack, one of the chief, Tom Curry, bought the large rolls, like rolls of sandpaper, and he had us paint it. And then cut it up into the sizes we wanted. And it could mount it on some kind of strong backing. So there are so many, thank you for reminding us, there are so many ways.
There are so many ways, yeah. And it's interesting, I'm finding there's a general discussion going on about the archival quality of pastels. It's like pastels are very aware of the archival. Why are we so uptight about this? You know, if it outlives me, that's pretty good, you know. One of the eminent internationally known pastelists, she and I were talking, she's like, yeah, I don't really care about that stuff. I'm like, well, if she doesn't care, why am I so worried about it? But there is a balance, you know. If you have been to the Farnsworth Museum in Rockland and you've seen some of the Wyeth paintings, there's a Jamie Wyeth painting, I think it's acrylic or oil, about this big, of Andy Warhol. And you know how we artists are, we go like, oh, we're not like, oh yes, look at that. We're like, oh, how did they do that, right? and the guards at the museum, step back from the painting, man, you know. But I went and I asked, I said, gosh, that looks like cardboard. He wouldn't paint on cardboard. That's not archival. And so I asked the lady there, she said, I don't know, here's the email address of the conservator. And I wrote her, she says, no, it's cardboard.
They did a, 15 years ago, the Farnsworth did a whole thing of Jamie Wyeth's sketches.
The ravens on the cardboard?
And they're all on cardboard. Yeah, one of Nureyev on cardboard too.
Yeah, that's right, because the Warhol and the Nureyev. And I'm like, so what do you do? How do you preserve this? She said, we just do what we can. I'm like, well, Andy? I'm not Andy. Jamie Wyeth, right? I'm not him, but if he's not worried about it, and if it lasts for 100 years after us, am I that concerned? I don't know. This is just a talking point. You want to see what you think. So, my little tree. Often I work, if I'm working intuitively without a plan, I tend to go with the emotion, the feeling I want of a painting. So that's often how I start, and I try to go inside. Recently, because my mother just passed, I'm finding, I said that, but I'm doing these paintings and I'm trying to dig into those, and it's helping me through the grieving process. It's really amazing how that is. So two very different types of paper here. What emotion do we want to go with? Do you want to go to somebody pick it?
Joy.
Joy. Okay, so we're going to be joyous. So which okay, where would we start?
Oh, go with the dark.
Joy on the dark.
Sure. Let's see if it.
Why do we do these things to myself?
Oh, yeah, you can go on the light.
What do you guys think? The dark?
The challenge.
I want to say the dark for something else. Is that okay?
Of course it's
hard to block. So my tree, and I want to gesture. One nice thing about a big stick like this is you can lay it on your side, on the side. I'm trying to get.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
Okay. I had coffee before I entered some. And you sketch out quickly. I mean, I know this tree, so by just quickly laying in. So here I'm just twisting, and these are creating branches for me in my sense. I know that this tree has been attacked from the ocean side this way, those northeasters coming in. So the branches on this side of the tree are going to be shorter and they're going to be pushed up. So you got to think about this. This little tree has personality. Has a history. These reach out a little further. My horizon line, I just want to get an idea where that might be. And then I'm going to pull in some branches here. So, ta-da, there's my tree. This is what I'm painting. I kind of like it at this stage. Sometimes I think I should just leave it here. Stop. Step back from your painting. This is important because you see it more objectively. A couple things. I'm kind of working like I'm teaching artists. I know a number of you are. So if I'm here all the time, I'm not getting that objective view of my painting. So as I do a couple of things, I think about it, and then as I'm walking away, I'm trying to leave the painting behind and become almost like a different person back here and look at it objectively. It was an interesting stroke. Why
So
did
to
I?
get those shorter strokes, how did you hold the charcoal? You just tweaked
Oh,
it?
the shorter way, I tend to lay it down on its side, but then I kind of lift one end,
Oh, okay,
just slightly.
all right.
And the more you do it, the more you get used to how much. It's a good question. Yeah. So since I'm playing around and I'm talking way too much, but teachers, I think, we're supposed to talk. I'm gonna grab my pan pastels. I love history. First NYU took me to in Brunswick with Nancy Lovely. She was using pan pastels. I had never heard of these before. I'm like, what are those? And they're,
Very prolific, yes.
yeah, she's into oil painting now. She switched over. They are pastels. They just laid out a different way. There's special tools that go with these. They're called soft tools. I like the biggest one. When I was in college, my professor said use the largest tool for as long as you can when you're painting to keep that loose feeling about what you're doing. And the way I tend to work is large areas, shapes, and then work forward. Usually a couple layers. So I tend to, and this one is dirty, but I'm not going to go get another one right now, try to keep one side lighter and one side darker, so I don't have to keep switching my tool.
So is that like a sponge?
Yeah.
Yes.
Makeup sponge.
But it's different.
It's
It
very dense.
It's very dense.
is more dense, because I tried makeup sponges,
Yeah,
I
they
thought, oh,
don't
these
work.
would be cheaper, and they don't really work.
It's like a closed set foam.
So see how I really, I mean, my painting's up there, but I'm not that worried about the photograph.
Yes. And you can wash them.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, you can.
So far.
Rag in hand, because as I'm working this in, and sometimes I'll take alcohol and I'll work the charcoal in. I could do that now. Yeah, let me do that. Because we're going for joyous, right? Bottle spray alcohol, I have two. You kind of get this dribbly thing, and this one, it gives you a fine mist. That's just kind of why I have those. Oh, I didn't introduce one of my favorite friends. Clear Shield, you get it at shoppa.com. It's the only place. It's one of those home networking kind of things. But this is great. It's silicone and aloe, and it's natural. It comes out as a mousse, and it creates a barrier on your skin. So it makes, one thing, your hands easier to wash, and it doesn't get absorbed into your skin. So I can take a rag. This is part of the other reason I'm using that wet dry, is I can use liquids on it. So this will set the charcoal down into the paper, so it's not going to move as much as I bring in my colors around it. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking the top of the tree, the branches go up and they're reaching for the sun. As you get to the middle branches, they go out, but the tips still reach up. And then the lower branches get so heavy that they're hanging down. So even it looks like I'm just fiddling around with a tree, but I'm thinking about each section of the branches. And some light shining through from in between. Who started the sky hole thing? Was that Alan Picard? Sky holes? That's what they call the negative space in between branches and stuff. So this is going to be grasses down here, so I'm just going to kind of, and maybe some of that fence. Sometimes I like, if you take this one, so I'm trying to get out people with, but if you spray it, can you see the resist? It's almost like watercolor, it kind of pushes the particles away. And those of you who've seen some of my things online, looking at a pastel particle, it's like little flakes of color, microscopically. And if you really blend, you're going to take those flakes on the paper and it's going to push them down. That's going to dull the color a little bit. That's, your underwashes will do that. You put something liquid on it, it's going to flatten those down. And then as you build your layers, you want those flakes to stay at all these different angles, because that's going to catch and reflect the light and make your painting glow more. That's why I'm waiting for this to dry.
I like that you use the sprayer with the alcohol. It's kind of a delicate application that way. You keep a little more of your underpainting.
Instead of using a heavy dip of a brush and stuff?
Yeah.
I'm so back and forth. I experiment all the time. That's probably one of my, I was going to say weaknesses, but it's, sometimes I almost spend too much time experimenting. But I don't think so. I mean, but part of me says yes, and part of me is like, no. Yellow sky. Joyous. I used to ask my high school students, like, what color can the sky not be? This I'm running, if you can see, along that horizon. I want to define and clarify that horizon, but then you want to blend it as well. And let's get a little darker something in under. Why I'm putting this color down here is because if I just did yellow up there, the painting would become somewhat disjointed. It wouldn't be connected. Sarah, you feeling joyous with that yet?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was
If I go out plein air painting, a lot of, you know how people have the easel thing, and you can see mine's very inexpensive, very light, I like that. I don't have the tray because I have seen so many easels go over and people lose. So I have a smaller box of pastels and I set it on the ground. The other benefit of doing that is when I'm painting,
You're exercising.
I'm exercising. I have to bend down and pick that up. I'm stretching my legs. I'm a teacher. What's the complement of yellow? Purple. Is it? It depends if we're talking the classic triadic color wheel or if we're going with the spectrum color wheel, right?
It's purple to me, that's
So I'm going to compromise and save little pieces of old paper. You can clip it up here and check your
what?
color. Or the pastel. You know how each one is a different hardness and stuff, and before you could just go like, oh, it's a good idea to get a feeling of what that one's going to do on your paper before you go to the painting. Also, if you need an edge, it helps you find that edge. See, I thought maybe that was a sharp edge. It's not so much, is it? It's not as sharp an edge as I thought. I'm going to throw in some darks. I mean, I know I started with a charcoal, but that just kind of gave me an idea where I'm going. You can see my very non-Terra type strokes. I'm dragging and I'm always moving because the branches, sometimes they're going this way, sometimes they're coming out at us, sometimes, and you want to vary that. I'll keep twisting my hand. Through, darker in here, there's going to be shadows down under here. Now this is joyous, so I don't want to use too much dark. Sarah says purple. I'm changing my value here. Whoop. I wasn't too concerned about the mark it was making at this point. Fairly loose. Nature things are always irregular. You don't want them too precise. And by allowing the pastel to almost hit the paper the way it wants to, I'm not controlling. It becomes a partnership between me and the medium.
Mm.
Very nice.
I didn't get him leaning as much as I know I would like to have gotten. That's okay. Important decision here. What color for the water behind? Too deep, yes? Yep. Do you do this? For checking your colors? I'm not finding what I want. I want that.
Do you prefer working with a limited palette?
I do. This one, I'm thinking complementary and split complement. So, even though everything is out here, and oftentimes when I'm in my studio, I have a little box that I'll set aside the colors that I'm working with. But we're kind of limited in time here. That was too dark. So water, fascinating. Water is out there. Reflections in the light come down across the water this way. I had somebody one day say, "Why are you painting your water vertically?" I'm like, because that's where the light is going. It comes down, bounces at us. But then you've got the surface of the water. And remember, water always finds its own level. If you're going to paint water, it has to be horizontal. Otherwise, your whole painting tips. And if you're doing like a river, I'm sorry, I'm just teaching. And the river's coming around a corner, you don't want to just do this curve. You have to get the surface as it's coming across. It still has to be horizontal for that to work well. I'm not necessarily the greatest artist. I'm not the greatest artist.
Did you do the logo for
I have a lot of
PSME?
information.
Did you do that logo? Or
No, that was done before me.
Did you do it, Mary?
Did she do it or did she hire it? Kate. Oh yeah. Kate did that
Oh.
purpose. I took it one day because I was playing with it and I put it into my Procreate and I played and colored it in. So
And you did the color?
Yeah,
Because it used to be.
it's
black.
digital.
Yeah.
I like the color.
We still use it. And I also took, if you see, sometimes we have just, to make it a square, I just took part of it and digitized it to make it still work. And that respects the history of PSME. I have no idea how we're doing. How are we doing? Good. Step back.
Yeah.
Now, ready? I'm gonna throw in, there's a little headline back there. But you don't need much. I'm dragging it horizontally across the water and just a little drag to create that. You don't have to spell it all out. It still says it. And my water's tipped. Nobody told me.
It's a little tippy.
Now you tell me. And I've lost the color almost. I think it's this one. It's respecting art teachers that paint and talk and teach all at the same time. If you haven't tried it, you should try it. It's a trick. What do we think? I'm gonna play, because this is just for fun. Too deep. All these colors in your pastel kit, how many times can you not find the color you're looking for?
Or there's never
Most of
the
the
right
time.
one.
Never the right one. I need it like this, but it needs to be lighter and a little more gray, and I'm not finding it. I'm just going to glaze here. Glaze is just what Claudette Gamache calls massaging. Just lightly massaging. It's like, okay. Now I'm turning it on its side to get more of a line through here. I'm blending the tree and the grass because they're just shapes and colors and light, so it doesn't really matter. All right. Let me try this. How are we doing on time or whatever?
Doing great.
Thanks, Sarah.
I loved what you did with the grasses.
Yes, the foreground is really
Beautiful.
I'm really wondering, like, not doing too much more, right?
That triangulation is really very nice.
I love triangle. I love that shape, the strength. Does this need something up here? Huh?
Probably.
Let's put it in the middle a little bit.
Yeah.
But it needs to connect to the tree. That didn't work. Thanks, Bob.
No, sorry.
I was with Look at that little twist. That's better,
There you
right? Now I need to find a yellow that is similar to. Look at that. How wonderful. For those coming to the workshop, if you haven't seen one of Tara's, may I mention you do mine? Of course. Okay. Her videos and how she works. My pastels, when I work my pastel, I wipe it off before I set it back in the box, and I try to put it in generally where it belongs.
I know where this is going.
You see Tara's box, she's working so directly and so immediately, and it's just, boom, and it goes down, and she picks up something. Sometimes I don't know how she can tell what color it is, because they're all kind of gray on the outside. But she's a better man than I am going it in. Whoa! See how that just crumbled? But I've saved the dust. I could make that into more pastel. I'm just defining some of my negative space here between the branches of the tree to give it a little more personality, a little more sparkle, a little more joie de vivre, right, Sarah?
Yeah. It looks, I think the colors are joyously put together.
I think that's what we were aiming for. And I don't always know what pastels I'm using. You know, some of those teachers that people were like, what pastel are you using? Oh, I'm using 352. I was like, okay, what color? I don't know, it's like a light yellow, neutral color. Why? And if I use it up, what am I gonna do when it's all used up? I'll buy something similar.
Find another one.
Fall in love with a different color.
Exactly. It's like when you're cooking and if you've tried a certain type of tomato in a sauce or something, it worked wonderfully. If you can't find that tomato again, you find another tomato. It's going to give it a slightly different feeling. It's like
You just go for the eggplant.
yeah.
I just ordered a bunch of eggplant.
I used to blend. I used to blend everything. I had to make it perfect. I like that bold strokes and all, like how fresh and to kind of bounce around and other colors shining through. And that's not great. That's kind of fun. What do you think? Snow fence? No snow fence. I don't think it's snow fence. No?
Go for it. Great.
I just think so. I'm not going to do it fast.
Well, I like that the main trunk is off to the side. It's not balanced.
Yeah, I wanted him to
It
be.
allows you to see the
Maybe split off.
far away.
This is normally where I would find a sharp edged new pastel, which I don't have today. Should we make? I'm going to give him a double. He's got a split personality this time.
Oh, did you get your stuff down?
Where's that tree? Every time I do the tree, it's different. Same subject, that's cool. It's different every time. What do we think?
Yeah, really good.
How about a little hint of reflection in, I don't have the right color. There it is. The light's coming down, catching on the top of the water. And it's just lightening that a little bit there, but it's almost so subtle you can't see the difference. Oh, but I've lost the branch now, right? Do you see that? This one, yeah, it's just become disconnected now. It's okay? Better? Painting number one, thank you.
I like the shadow.
I need to. It's fun. Drink water. Wow.
I like the way.
Thoughts, comments?
Yeah. I like the shadows and the tree.
Now, will you work on that more at home, or do you usually just
That's a
run and go?
question. Something like this, I usually leave it. From my approach, I've been finding that I work quickly. That energy that has gone into this painting, if I try to come back and work on it later, it's not the same energy. I'm not the same me in that other moment. So I try to finish as much as I can right off. Sometimes I'll come back with a few details. One I just submitted to IAPS. If you get my newsletter, I did share it in my newsletter, but it, I had it, and then someplace while I was moving, because I came up from North Carolina, I stayed at a friend's condo, then I went to my mom's, and I was out to my daughter. I mean, I'm just bouncing all around right now. I couldn't find the painting, and I knew there was a couple details I wanted to finish on it. So I found it the last day to submit to IAPS and finished it up, just did some touches and went, ooh, got that one in. But if I hadn't you know, okay, so I didn't. But I'm thinking that's, Terry, for me, more and more, I'm thinking this energy, this moment, this me is what I'm doing for this painting. And if I'm going to do a larger one, I try to use as large a tool as possible to get that done. That's a great question. Makes me think. That's how you can see me thinking and thinking. Okay, would we, another one more?
Sure.
Easy for you guys to say.
Let's try that me.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with my pastels?
Sure.
All right.
Little spotty spot here.
That's
Do you know my image?
Do you have like a reference?
See how sly I was on that one? That was really good.
It's pretty fun, huh?
So for those that don't know, Tara Will is our jury and judge for this show. She's also giving us a workshop this weekend. She's from Maryland. Eminent? Yes, you are. She's an eminent pastelist, which is like the top level, and has 4 young kids at home. The first one just started high school. I know. Time flies.
Wow. Yes. Well, we could do.
Do you want the black paper?
Yeah, the black's great.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. I've never used that, but we'll see what happens. It is. I'm kind of more into light and shadow paintings, so I like looking through your photo references here. I'm much more attracted to the contrast of light and shadow painting. So there's kind of almost like 2 camps. There's local tone, which is like a flat gray day when there's not a lot of high light contrast. And then there's so local tone or light and shadow. And it doesn't always fall into those 2 categories, but I would say 99% of the time they will. So it's just really, is there a strong light source or is there not a strong light source, essentially? When you're working with light and shadow paintings, I like to almost split it into a dichotomy of, is it being touched by the light source, is it not being touched by the light source? And you basically dictate those values that you're choosing based on that separation. And it's a way in your brain, I think, for you to divide it into pieces that are a little more palatable, that, you know what I mean, it's a clear-cut question to ask yourself. That being said, this is backlit, which is not quite exactly the same as a light and shadow painting, but
She
we're
hasn't
gonna
looked
give
at my
it,
photos before, so she's waiting.
yeah, we're gonna give it a whirl. We're gonna do this one. And can everybody see that? I feel like Dana White.
You want me to hold it or something? Or you
No, I mean,
I would set it up on the.
yeah, I would. Is it gonna time out or will it stay?
I don't remember.
Okay. I might need your
But there's no
picture
password on it.
print or something. So one cool thing that's happening in this is that really, really severe light source. So we can get some simultaneous contrast going there, which is where we're gonna try and find 2 colors that make the eye vibrate nicely. So let's give it a whirl. I usually, we all kind of have the thing that we like to work with. I actually like to work not with charcoal.
You like a pen, right?
I like it's like a China marker, but I don't have one, so this will be close.
Okay.
And so I would start kind of in a similar way. And maybe a little more gesture driven in how I would start a painting. There, kind of a nice. So like that would probably be a drawing to start a painting for me. It's just to kind of get the gist of what's going on, and I like to call it a map, but I say like think countries and states, not cities and roads, you know, because it's like you want those big shapes going on. So, and these are not my pastels. I should probably like wipe them carefully. Put them back. Where is she? I'm gonna get you talking to me, but I said I use this towel to clean them and return them to their homes.
Oh.
Do you need something else?
No, I was just saying, it's so nice, I have to put it back. Mine, so yeah, I also think
Don't worry too much, Sarah. Yeah, you can have to speak up.
Can folks keep their voices down so we can hear?
I think it's helpful to start by laying your darks down too. And you're gonna get a sense on a dark surface of how dark you can go. So the other thing that I like to think about too is kind of whether or not something has a nature to it that's horizontal or vertical or diagonal. And so in this case, you know, all of this foliage is very horizontal. So the marks that I make to kind of express that, I think also need to kind of stay in a horizontal format. So it's not, you don't have to do that. It's just, to me, it's something that helps kind of identify some of what's going on. I don't normally do washes, and I don't normally work on this surface either. I like Le Carte, which is a surface that can't get wet. So So I'm just going to come through and lay all my darks in first. I think too, as long as things are the same value, they tend to behave okay together. So you could take, you know, that green tone and kind of throw some blue on top. And they're going to not make mud and behave together because they're the same value. If you start shifting into a higher key value or something that has more white in it, that's when you start to get mud. So if you're looking to incorporate multiple colors in, like, let's say, a shadow space, sticking to the same value is kind of the key to not producing mud, in my opinion. So we have our darks pretty much laid in. They're also kind of relative. So even though, like, let's say we go with something like this for that cloud formation behind there. I don't remember where these go. It's still technically in shadow, really. The cloud, does that make sense? So because it's not being lit, it's in that dichotomy, it's pretty much in shadow. So, it's kind of strange being in someone else's box.
I know this isn't challenging.
No. I'm just like, I'm looking at it like, what does that do?
That's where you just put a piece up here, right?
Box. You know, if I don't.
You don't test.
I don't test either. Yeah. And, you know, part of the reason why I switched to LaCarte, honestly, is because, like, as the marks got, I don't wanna say crazier, but bolder and bolder, like, there were areas in here where, like, see how I've kind of dragged the color over this, but you can still see the paper coming through? But it's not coming through consistently, right? So there's like kind of a blob here and a little blob there and a fat blob there and a blob here. And it's not, to me, the LaCarte, the surface of it is so consistent that it doesn't interrupt any marks. And so to me, that's what I prefer to work with. But I would recommend that you try as many papers as you can afford.
Well, the sandpaper again is not, I mean, it's not a great paper, but it's
Sure.
something to work on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good point.
Yeah. So I would say most of the darks are laid down there. This is an interesting surface, isn't it? Yeah. Not bad interesting, just different. It's funny, I've gotten like so spoiled just like doing my LaCarte thing that it's kind of nice to push yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes, I think. Let's see. And there's also, you know, there's so many things going on like when you're working, and I think it's interesting too to talk about like the pressure with which you make a mark as well. So like I just laid some of that green in, but I was like barely touching the paper, and how hard you push or if you lift off as you finish a marker, all of that influences how that mark looks and feels, and how you can get kind of almost like the softness of that pan pastel stuff by just barely applying the pressure to it. So it's almost like a very similar thing. Yeah.
It's like the Claudette caressing the paper. I mentioned that.
Caressing. That's, did you make this one?
Yep.
That's rough. But what's cool about it, like, look at all the texture you can get by, like, I mean, the pastel's doing that, I'm not, because it's got so much of the pumice or sand in it. So that's good.
Sorry, the easel's not really firm, so you can do your nice bold
Oh, no.
strokes.
Okay. That's all good. I kind of want some of this in here, too. So when I'm like making this mark now, I'm like barely touching. I don't even know how much tooth really this is gonna hold because I've never used it before. But and I don't know where this
Just
went.
nearby,
You're
don't worry.
gonna regret.
I threw you up here, so you're
Okay, so if we talk about simultaneous contrast in the light areas, I find that often the interior of the brightest lights tend to be cooler and then kind of radiate that warmth. And so I would go with like let's go with like a,
It's like you're looking for nocturne.
this is like a, so even though this is reading kind of like a white in a way, you're not supposed to do that either. Don't do it. There's also light up here. We're gonna do that. There's quite a lot of light up here as well. And once again, those are reading as horizontal lines. I don't know if you've noticed, but down here even, the lines that I've made are horizontal. That's gonna help sit that down. Because the light that's coming through there is kind of sitting down. Right. So if we make that, then let's go with like color right up against it. So when you take that kind of cooler turquoise that's behaving like a white, but it's actually turquoise, and you throw something warm next to it, it's gonna really kind of glow. Once again, I am kind of keeping all of this horizontal. I want to kind of preserve the horizontalness of it. I know that sounds weird, but. And you'll have to forgive me because this isn't my reference, it isn't my box, it isn't my paper. So don't have too high expectations.
I'm just pleased that you were willing to do that.
Happy to.
If you're eminent, you can do anything.
Is that
Yeah, that's
nice? Good to know.
Yeah.
Really close.
Oh, I also usually talk a lot while I'm painting, so if you have any questions, like, happy to try and answer them. If you have any.
You have a teaching where you talk about the direction of the lines, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and radial.
Yes.
That, the strength of those lines and how you use them to me is very impressive. Not that you can do it on this paper and with your situation you're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of
She's not finding the color she wants.
Is that funny? Where am I? You know, I did kind of very vaguely say that, you know, keeping the cloud shapes and the tree shapes, I mean, this is so horizontal, right? And it has a very horizontal nature to it, and it's like, those are the things that I'm looking for to try and maintain, you know? And horizontal lines, you know, when we think horizontal, we think horizon, we think floor, we think bed, we think things that are static and peaceful ocean, you know, all of that is very flat and calm. And as we move to vertical lines, they tend to have more strength to them. We think things that are rooted that have strength, we think trees, buildings, you know, standing, all of that has a little more energy than a horizontal line will. And a diagonal line is going to have the most energy to it to move the eye around, because diagonals tend to give a sense of movement. So something falling over, you know, like, is it going to move one way or another? And so you can use the direction of the line to move the eye around the painting and determine how powerful something is, or how much you're driving the eye to a specific place by utilizing the fact, like, if you want something to sit down and be quiet, use a horizontal line. You know, if you want something to sit down and be quiet, don't put two really high contrasting colors or values together. Like, keep it similar value, horizontal line. That's going to move the eye away from that space and move it into somewhere else. So it's kind of like, if everything's special, then nothing's special. And so being able to utilize, you know, value, color, directional mark making to really move the eye in an intentional way is just kind of it's more tools in the belt for you to be able to kind of move a viewer through a painting. And what I think it also does is it kind of gives a conceptual focal point to something. So I'm not like forcing your eye to look at a specific point on a painting. I'm trying to force you to engage with it in a way that was intentional. So let's say I loved like a specific part of a scene. Well, everything that I'm doing, I want to support explaining that to you. Does that make sense? So, but in doing that, you do need things to sit down and be quiet. You need things to be powerful, and you need to, and so that this reference also is very calm and quiet, and a big reason of that, even though there's a really bright light source, a big reason of that is all those horizontals are giving us this sense of calm. It's horizontal in the branches, it's horizontal in the sky, it's horizontal, throughout, and that's kind of helping support that concept. There's kind of like some green in there. Sky. So once again, because I'm using a similar value, like I can come in and like throw some like more green blue in here, and they're gonna behave okay together because they're the same value. If they were different values, they'd start to probably produce a little bit of mud. I'm going to and there are also, there are areas where we might want like really strong marks to kind of define some of these spaces. And there are areas where we want things, again, to fall off into something softer. And so we just want to make sure that we're kind of supporting that. And so, like, if I make a mark like that mark I just made, like, I'm barely touching the paper across there. And if I go in with my finger and want to, like, knock some of that edge off, I can. But what that did was it just kind of pushed out the direction of the light source here. Because it tends to be, this is when we talked about, like, something more radial. Light tends to radiate out of it in a more circular pattern. And so if you make marks that, once again, like this, it's kind of going up and then out and then, kind of in that spoking sun wheel like kind of pattern, you're supporting the narrative of how that light's moving. You guys are quiet.
It's disconcerting.
I know, right? Talk to me. Yeah, so and then you can always, once again, this is not a paper I'm super familiar with, but typically you can kind of come back and retrieve some areas of darkness if you need them.
That's one of my favorite sticks.
That's beautiful. Is that smelly?
It's really sick.
It's a nice color. It's dirty now.
It's dark. Everybody loves eggplant, but to me that has like it's this dark olive green. It's just
What color is it?
it's a dark olive green.
Bring it.
Yes.
Tell us now.
I think it's Richardson, but I'm not.
Memorize all the colors.
When I again,
And I also say to people too, like, you get to choose, once again, what narrative you're gonna give a viewer and what you're presenting to them. And I kind of joke with students, I'm like, there is no tree police that's gonna like come behind me and be like, oh my God, you missed that branch, or you missed that spot, or you didn't do this or that or whatever. And, you know, part of that's just my nature of having a very short attention span and not caring. I mean, but part of it too is that, you know, it supports the concept without having to suffer over the detail. I'm really good at starting stuff, just in life generally. Sometimes I struggle with the follow-up, so I think the work kind of almost reflects that in a way. And so, you know, kind of almost like knowing that is also half the battle, right? Like,
So do you tend to finish a painting in one session?
absolutely. I very rarely go back to any painting, ever. But once again, it's a personal preference, and it's not like discounting anybody who wants to do it in multiple sittings at all. It's I think almost like purely born from personality in a way, you know. I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but I'll say, like, I had a student, and they were like, I want to loosen up. I said, okay, like, tell me about yourself. Like, what do you like? And they're like, well, I'm an investigative tax consultant, and I love details. I'm like, and it's not that you, if you like those things, it's not that you can't, it's not that you can't change that, but I think too, if we deny ourselves kind of our nature, we don't learn how to take the things that we're good at and apply them to a painting, or to painting in a way that is your own voice. And so, you know, it's okay to admire things about other people's work and not implement them in your own. And it's also okay to, you know, emulate things you like. It's just don't deny yourself that thing that you like because you want to be something else. Like, there is kind of that personality piece, I think, that influences how we behave and how we think. So don't deny that.
Which is so evident in this show. There is such an eclectic choice of
Yes,
things.
it was really a fun show to see, fun show to jury. So much variety, which is wonderful. I really enjoyed, I was saying too, like, you know, seeing the show in person versus online is quite different as well. And just, you know, how that shakes out, it's kind of cool to see variety. So yeah, and you can do as much or as little as you feel fit. Don't, you know. I also say, and I don't want to be like flippant about it, and I say some of them like as jokes, because like, oh, that's funny. But truly, like, I try to not think of painting as being a punishment. That's my take on it. And so it's, you know, if once again, to me, like, obsessing over being perfect and detail and, you know, did I do this right? Did I do that right? Am I done? All that would feel like a punishment to me, and so I don't paint that way. And so, you know, give yourself grace, allow yourself the time to learn who you are and how you tend to work and the things that you like. And once you find what those things are, take them and run with it. Like, that's to me the fun part of what we do. And I think we see that in a lot of the work that's here too. There's just a lot of nice variety and different voices, and I love that. negative space too. Now, it's nice to kind of carve shapes away with the negative space as well. How are we on time? I don't know.
That's why I'm
1:30, you might want a little break.
No, I was just thinking. I also, people will say, how do you know when a painting's done? And my answer tends to be when it stops getting better. That's when it's
Really
done.
defining that.
Right? And so, I don't know, everybody's different in their approach, but I would prefer something to look like a passing fleeting thought that's fresh and like, to feeling like I've really overworked something. But once again, personal preference.
I like how you softened that area of that glow.
Yeah, it was a little hard. This is the thing too. So like in that photo reference, you basically have two main characters. And they're gonna fight with each other where that light source is coming through. So you almost, it's a little more powerful to relinquish one, like put one away and let the other one control the situation a little bit more. And so,
So you put the sun away.
yeah, put
She
the
did, she
stuff
just
away.
blocked up the sun.
Yeah.
It's cool. Looks great.
Stuff it in a sack, hide it away. And there are nice kind of areas where that outer edge of the tree is getting hit by the light source. But you can kind of do a little bit of that backlit action under there. And yeah, I mean, this is once again not like, it's not a punishment. And you get to choose what you're gonna share with an audience, so choose wisely.
Isn't that an Indiana Jones quote?
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And I don't really like to invent a lot of information. Insofar as like adding, I'm good at subtracting information, but I don't really want to make up information if I can avoid it, just because you were saying earlier like how organic the landscape is. We have these ideas in our head of how things are like should be or are. Like if you think of like an orange, you think it's a circle, but it's not really a circle. It has that kind of like lip on the top, So same in nature. It's like if you think of like a rock, like rocks are so abstract to the point where a lot of times when we try and replicate those without having the reference, it just, you're not gonna probably do it very well because we don't really think that abstractly as nature is, So, yeah.
Mine partially was because I know that tree so well, I can play around with it.
Sure.
And you're just jumping into the middle of stuff with bravado, with not your own supplies, not your own photo. I'm impressed. I am very impressed.
Well,
Oh, just say thank you.
thank you. Like it's not my best. And if every painting was your best painting, that wouldn't be the best painting. So there's gonna be times where you're gonna produce things that you don't feel are at the caliber of where you want it to be, and that's okay too. I think as long as you learn from them, it's good. Do you guys have any questions? You're so quiet. No?
Do you usually work on photos or do you do plenty?
I do both, honestly. I've probably moved a little bit away from plein air, especially from a competitive perspective, just because I got to the point where I think plein air, well, I think competitive art in general is like counterproductive for a lot of people. I mean, I like to think that I'm not really wildly influenced by it one way or another, because I generally, like, I'm gonna paint what I want to paint, whether anybody else likes it or not. But I think a lot of people get kind of tied up in the pressure of that, and I don't know that it's always super healthy for everyone. But
Tara, how did you decide to not do the sky lighter? I mean, it's wonderful, so dramatic.
you mean this part?
Yeah.
I could push it lighter, but if I pushed it lighter, then everything, since everything's kind of relative to each other, it's like if I want this to be the lightest point, or like the main light source, I need that to once again sit down darker in value and kind of.
So it's not just the contrasting colors, the contrasting values.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's that saying, you know, value does all the work and color takes all the glory. And
Color
it's
gets all the
true,
credit.
because if you, like, can I wipe my hands on this?
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
No.
So like if I took, or can I take a picture of this?
Whatever, yeah, okay.
So if I took a picture of this, and this is just a fun tool, just generally speaking, and although it looks a little blurry, but that's okay. And I hit edit, and I go to saturation, and whoa, not that way. And I take out all the saturation, it's still reading like it's supposed to, right? Using this saturation tool is different than using a filter, like the noir, black and white or whatever, because that's changing like multiple parts. So it's a filter that's changing multiple things. It's not just changing saturation. So if you really want to know the saturation bit, what your values are looking like, that's the way to do it. So you can do that first with your reference. If you struggle with values and you want to like get a sense of what that looks like pre-painting, or you can do it after to assess whether or not your values are accurate and working. The other nice thing, if you do have Procreate, which I know Terrilynn was talking, sorry. I want to say, I went to a school with a girl who was Terrilynn, so sorry. If you took, let's say this into Procreate, you could paint on it with a pen, make adjustments on here. It's a lot less painful than doing it on your painting and being like, oh, I hate that. So if you are questioning something, or she was talking about adding a figure to a landscape or something like that, doing it digitally and then assessing it on your painting is often less painful than doing it on your painting and wanting to throw it
Plus
in.
with pastel, you get too much dust on there, it's gonna build up too much. when you
Right,
paint.
and the thing about the tube of the paper is generally, it can only hold so much. And I mean, this behaved pretty nicely. I like that.
Surprising, isn't it?
It is
Yeah.
surprising. I've become very attached to my Lacarte. I can't remember the last time I painted on something that's not Lacarte, because I just am so comfortable with that paper. It's just such a pretty finish. But this held up pretty well, I think. So, but you'll see, to me, this is like Terra muted. There's still like a discomfort there that I see that's not like me, but on my Lacarte I'm very comfortable. So you will find that, you know, there's pastels that you like or tend to work better for the way you work. There's going to be papers that tend to work better for the way you work, and all of that kind of takes some time, I think, to develop what suits your
Do you
nature.
use a colored Lacarte?
I do. I like mid-tone or darker. So I was happy to have the dark paper. Because, and I've heard it expressed this way, and I tend to agree, on a mid-tone to dark paper, I could make it darker and I can make it lighter. But if I take like a white piece of paper, I can only make it darker. So I can't go both ways. Whereas on a mid-tone to dark paper, I can push it both directions. So, something to think about.
Yes, you have.
I think it's better if I just mess up a little.
That's so cool, huh?
What did she say at the end? Nodded his head.
So we've got about 18 minutes before we go to the.
They get a drink.